Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there, and I'm ready to go. Looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 502. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about mountains and water, markets and flying fish as we go above, offshore of, and even under Seattle, Washington. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. And now, let's talk about Seattle. I'd like to welcome back to the show Mary Jo Manzanares from Traveling with MJ. And Mary Jo has come to talk to us about Seattle. Mary Jo, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Chris. I'm glad to be back.
And I say welcome back. We've done one show before, if I'm remembering correctly, which was on hill towns in Tuscany.
And we also did one on Belfast.
We've done two shows. That is correct. Excellent. And I'll put links to those in the show notes so that people can check them out. But we haven't talked about Seattle on the show in forever. I think it's been 9.5 years or something like that. And it was a place that I wanted to do. And I don't know why I didn't think of you, because you live in Seattle.
I've lived in this area all my life, so I've got some familiarity.
And why should someone come to Seattle?
Well, it'd be really easy to say, because despite what you hear about it raining all the time, you should just ignore that and come because it's a beautiful destination. But all of us who live here are just pretty comfortable saying, yep, it rains all the time, because it's sort of the ongoing joke about we don't want people to really discover how great it is here.
Now, my understanding is that the actual number is that you get 200 sunny days a year.
Well, I don't know what it is.
You have to trust me here. I know it's 100 days less than we get, but it is 200 sunny days a year is the number that I heard.
Well, and we always laugh because when you stack up the annual rainfall against some other cities that you think of as being warm, sunny destinations, it's less.
Right.
But the reality is our rainfall is spread out over a rather long period of time during the winter and early spring. So it's going to rain and be kind of drizzly and gray for a great number of days during that time frame.
Excellent. What kind of itinerary do you recommend for people who are coming to Seattle?
Well, there's Seattle is a city that's fairly spread out
Hmm.
in terms of the different areas. It's much like San Francisco in that it's built on hills. And on one hand, it's very compact. And if you pick an area, you can do a lot without ever needing your car. But if you're going to get out into some of the suburbs or the surrounding areas, you are going to need a car. So I think the first question when you're planning your itinerary is, do you really want to stay in the downtown core and experience everything the downtown has to offer, which is quite a bit of activity, or do you want to do a trip out to the outlining areas, which gets you out to the mountains, some of the parks, and the wine country? So that really is a key decision to make when you're planning your vacation here.
Cool. And let's give them some information on how to do that by starting with downtown.
The downtown core is a great place to stay and visit. You know, I'm local here, and we go into the city and spend a couple of days on a fairly regular basis. We just did last weekend, and it's fun to be a tourist in your own hometown and look at it through those different eyes. So my first tip would be to find a hotel that's centrally located. It will save you on transportation costs, whether that's, you know, our metro transit system or a taxi or Uber or whatever your transportation of choice is.
And is there a neighborhood you recommend for centrally located?
You know, I just recommend right downtown.
Okay. And for me, that definition would be somewhere along the monorail.
No, actually not.
Okay, good. I'm glad I asked.
I would recommend something more in the central business district.
Okay.
Something from, if you were doing some searches, you would probably, pull up, something around the Pike Place Market,
Okay.
or I think that's one of the, if you're searching neighborhoods, or simply central business district or something. The area under the monorail is the edge of downtown, but that also takes you into the Seattle Center area. And that's not a bad area to be in either. But I think for a visit that most centrally located, I picked something more in that true downtown business district area.
Okay. And when you say the Seattle Center area, we'll talk about it in a little bit. That's where the Space Needle is.
That is, yes.
Okay. All right. So going back, you started us in, I was going to say in Pikes Peak, but I've got the wrong one.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong state.
And locals say Pike Place Market. We don't say Pikes
Okay.
Market, or if we're going to shorten it, we say the market. And any other name other than Pike Place Market or the market, we sort of know someone's from out of town.
And Pikes Peak is definitely a giveaway.
It's definitely way out of town.
Tell people about what Pike Place Market is.
It is a working market, and there's some argument over whether it's the longest continually operating one or not. So I don't want to stake that claim. But it is both a market where local growers of fruit, produce, we've got fish markets, meat markets, you've got artisans, a variety of crafts, specialty made products like honey and tea and olive oil and bakeries. And it's just a real working market. And locals shop there. I mean, if I'm in the city, I go by and pick up whatever I need for dinner or my fruit for a couple of days. So it's huge. There are hundreds of shops, and actually they call them stalls, which could be anything from a fruit stall to a pet shop. It's busy. It is crazy. It is crowded. But honestly, no trip to Seattle, for me, whether that's your first or 100th time, is complete without a stop by the market.
Well, and for tourists, there is one particular stall that tends to get a little more tourists than others.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I've never understood this one. They never know the name of the stall. They just want to know where they're throwing the fish. And it's like, okay, go and watch fish being thrown. And they've really sort of turned it into a performance art, if you will.
And it's just the fish market. I don't know the name of it either.
I don't know that I actually do. The way that I give people directions at the market is at the end of Pike Street, which is how it came across the name Pike Place Market. And there's a big sign up above, which is the classic sign that you see that says Public Market or Pike Place Market. And right in that kind of corner, 90-degree corner, is a bronze pig.
Right.
And the pig's name is Rachel. And so for me, if I'm meeting someone and we're going to meet at the market, I always just say, we'll meet right by Rachel. And that's sort of a meeting spot that I've always used as a way to say, this is where we're going to meet. And if you go to Rachel, the throwing fish is just right behind that.
I assume there's a story why the pig's name is Rachel.
There probably is, but, it's been how it is when you've been so long, you don't know, and I don't even know if it's true or urban legend or maybe a little of both. I mean, the best stories are always a little of both, I guess. But it's a piggy bank, so it has to do with funding projects for the market, and there are, a lot of people barely getting by that are both live and work at the market. So I think it funds some of the healthcare initiatives down there.
Interesting. Okay. Where to next?
I would recommend when you're at the market that you pick up some. I go to De Laurentiis always. That's one of the big Italian markets there to get some food and cheese because you're going to want that either for a picnic in your hotel room or to pack up a little picnic as you go to your next destination. But if you're down in that part of town, I'd probably recommend hitting up Seattle Art Museum. We locally call that SAM. And that's not too far down the street, a few blocks. It's a great balance between frenetic energy at the market and crowds and loud noises and craziness to a little bit of serenity and fun and it's a great indoor destination too. So if it's raining, that's a nice balance.
And I will tell you that Rachel is named after a real 750-pound pig who won the 1985 Island County Fair.
Wow.
And was also the inspiration behind Pigs on Parade fundraiser throughout Seattle in 2001 and again in 2007.
Yep. Pigs on Parade was our version of the cows from Chicago, and I think a few other cities have done similar kind of art.
Absolutely, yeah. San Jose did sharks. Excellent. Where to next?
So after Seattle Art Museum, and by the way, I guess in Seattle we have this thing of having outdoor installations or something that we tell people to meet by. But outside of Seattle is the Hammering Man. So that's how you can easily find the Seattle Art Museum. There's a large art installation outside that has a man with a moving arm that looks like they're hammering. So that's how you find the Seattle Art Museum. It's always nice to do a little walk along the waterfront. Again, this is a weather permitting kind of thing, which is why most of my recommendations about what to do, we're going to have sort of a yin-yang indoor-outdoor so that you can plan according to the weather. The Seattle waterfront has been somewhat cleaned up and made very tourist friendly. We have the ferry terminals down there. So if you've picked up something at the market, you can take that picnic lunch and get on a ferry and either go over to Bremerton or Bainbridge Island. If you don't have a car, I'd recommend just doing it on a nice day as a little boat trip. That's a perfect time to enjoy some outdoor weather, see the skyline of Seattle from the water looking back, enjoy some time on the water, have a picnic lunch, and take a little afternoon trip. The trip to Bremerton takes about an hour, and the trip to Bainbridge Island takes about a half an hour. So as a walk-on, you can just ride both ways real easily, and it's a nice little day trip and a break up the stuff downtown on a sunny day.
And you say head down to the waterfront. We are really going downhill.
Yep,
Seattle
much
is
like
built
San
on a hill.
Francisco, it's all downhill.
And you say cleaned up. Last time I was there, the waterfront was mostly a highway. Seattle wasn't really taking advantage of the fact that it is a beautiful city on the water.
I'm not sure where you were. You might have been on what we call the viaduct, which is a highway giving you access into the city. But when you walk down, there are actually stairs from the Pike Place Market that you can take down stairs, but we usually just walk down the street. It's less of a grade. I mean, there's lots of parking, but no, there are restaurants and things like that down on the water. So I have a feeling you were up top on the viaduct, which is
I probably was.
That's just a highway with access in and out of the city, depending on where you live and how long you've lived here, working variously well. So it's a political thing, local politics.
You talked about taking the ferry. We're taking the ferry over to, and we're doing what when we get there?
Actually, I would recommend not even getting off. If you don't have a car and you're not making the drive, I just think taking the ferry is a very, very popular afternoon trip on a sunny day, just to enjoy being out on the water. We're located on Puget Sound. It's a beautiful bay. You can get a beautiful view of the Seattle skyline from the water, enjoy some sun. And even if it's cold, I mean, on a sunny day, those crisp, sunny days of fall, just beautiful. You can take your picnic lunch with you. You've got to have lunch anyway. So take your picnic lunch with things you've gotten from the market and enjoy a boat ride.
And when you say it's located in the Puget Sound, I feel like you're underselling the natural beauty of the Seattle area. On a sunny day, as you look down towards the water from downtown, you've got the Olympic mountain range out in the distance. And then if you turn around and look the other direction, you'd see the Cascade Mountains.
To the west, we've got the Olympics. To the east, we've got the Cascades. And to the south, we have Mount Rainier. So on a clear day, you see it all. And on a really, really clear day, you can see Mount Baker up north.
And both Baker and Mount Rainier are volcanoes that are standing alone, so they're quite spectacular.
Yes, they are. I see Mount Rainier out of my front door, and there are days that it looks just like an ice cream cone.
Now, I would say that if you don't want people to think of rain when you think of Seattle, that naming the nearest mountain Rainier is probably not the best idea.
Yeah, well.
Where to next?
Well, I'll give you some other areas downtown. If you want to do shopping, there's Westgate Mall I guess they call it Westlake Center, I'm sorry, as well as Pacific Place, which are two of our shopping areas downtown. They also have restaurants and everything. So again, if it's raining and you don't want to be on the streets, that's the time to pop in and, pick up an umbrella if you didn't bring one, or your sunglasses if you forgot to bring those. At Westlake Center, that's also the location for the monorail.
Okay, that's the southern end of the monorail.
Yes, and there's only two stops for the monorail, the north end at the Seattle Center and the south end at Westlake Center. So this is a good time to pick up what you need at Westlake Center and then go up to the top floor and catch the monorail, which dates back to the Seattle World's Fair, and take that to what we now call the Seattle Center or the Seattle Center campus, which was the site of the 1962 World's Fair.
Okay. And so we've got the Space Needle there, and what else will we find there?
The Space Needle, which is one of the, I hate using the word iconic, but if you see a skyline of Seattle, it's what is most noticeable in our skyline. And it dates back to the World's Fair. And it has both an observation desk, a restaurant, some other things there. Most visitors at some point to a city are going to want to go up there, if nothing else, for the spectacular view. Also at the Seattle Center is the Pacific Science Museum. If you're a member of any of your local science museum, you're traveling with kids, they usually have some sort of reciprocal admission agreement, and it's worth popping in. The exhibits vary. There's a permanent one on dinosaurs, which is always very interesting for kids. And the other ones are rotating exhibits, usually here for 6 or 8 months. And for visitors from out of town who are traveling with kids, that really is a great stop because it gives them a chance to run off a little energy. It's very interactive. If they belong to something at home, it's free and is a good rainy day activity for families. Also down at the Seattle Center is the new Chihuly Museum, Glass Museum.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how long that's been open now.
Well, since we did the last episode, I think.
Yeah, this is in the last couple of years. And if you're a fan of the Pilchuck School of Glass Blowing, you're going to want to make this a stop. You can see some things from outside, looking in, and it's an ooh-ah. Many years ago, I saw him when he was still blowing, and how these beautiful things come out of the process is amazing. And it's worth stopping in there. Again, a good rainy day activity. Honestly, not as family friendly.
Okay.
It's a little more densely packed in than the Seattle Art Museum in terms of display. I mean, it's still well laid out, but if the kids are older, it's great. But for little kids that you're worried about if they might need to run around, probably not the perfect choice. But as an adult, I mean, there's great stuff, very impressive. And again, if you're enjoying the center outdoors, because it's a huge mini, I think it's like 60 some acres, you can pop inside if the rain starts. So that's a good yin yang thing. However, if you're outdoors and it's a nice day, or at least a pleasant day and not raining, I'd head to the International Fountain. Again, if you picked up some goodies at the market and decided not to take a boat trip, heading to the Seattle Center and the International Fountain is a great place to enjoy that picnic lunch that you brought along. It's huge. You'll see all sorts of signs there, and the fountain is programmed in sort of a dancing sort of display of lights and water. During the really warm summer, you will see kids going down to sort of see if they could race the fountain and play in the spray.
Excellent. The other museum I think that we didn't talk about the last time we did a show, even though I think it was open, was the Experience Music Project.
It has changed. And when you take the monorail to the Seattle Center, you will actually go through a portion of it. And it's now a combination of the EMP, which is Experience Music Project, and the Science Fiction Museum.
Oh, really?
So it's now, it's now a combo. And I believe it's a dual ticket now. The EMP focuses on music of all types, from primitive rhythms on up to electronica. And the Science Fiction Museum had a Star Wars exhibit, had a costume display from all of the Star Wars movies, which was a great prelude here to the new Star Wars movie coming out.
Interesting. And for people who are unaware, this is a museum that was founded by Paul Allen, one of the co-founders of Microsoft, and it is a Frank Gehry building, so even the building itself is worth seeing, even if you don't have time to go inside.
And it's a crazy building. So, I mean, oddly shaped, brightly colored. If you're flying over Seattle and you happen to see it from the air, you'd be going, what? What's that? Because it's so crazy. And then the Science Fiction Museum started as a small private collection up on Capitol Hill, and then eventually developed into a larger collection, moved, and I'm not sure when it was actually moved into the dual exhibit down at the center.
Okay. Are there any other things that we want to see while we're downtown before we head a little further out?
You know, one other thing at the center, and I don't do it, but I guess if you're traveling with kids, it might be a little break. They do have some carnival rides, some of those kinds of things. Fairly small, nothing, elaborate or modern. I mean, if you went to a theme park, anywhere else, you're going to have something that are far more impressive. But it does make a great little break if you're traveling with kids and you need to do a little bribery or a little break.
Negotiation is what we call that.
Oh, okay. So you don't have kids. So negotiations. If you need to negotiate, you can put that in your arsenal. One other thing that I missed down on the waterfront is that we do have the Seattle Wheel down there now.
Mm-hmm.
So like many destinations, Las Vegas, London, I'm sure a few other places, we do have a Ferris wheel that's down in the water and also gives you a view of the skyline and of the water.
Excellent.
One of the best things about being downtown is some of the history that has gone on in the past. I mean, Seattle has a colorful history, not all of it an impressive history. I mean, we were a portal for the gold rush up in Alaska. And as a result, we had a harbor and a wharf that catered to both to the best and to the worst of what was going on at that time.
Well, in fact, you have half of the museum, as I recall, that's about the Klondike Gold Rush.
Klondike Gold Rush, yes. If you've got a particular interest in history, that is worth a stop. It's sort of small and specialized. Mm-hmm. I've had a lot of people either love it or hate it. If you have that interest, it's worth stopping by. It's a very quick walkthrough. We also have a police museum that's also rather small and niche. And then if you really want to enjoy some history, I'd recommend getting down to the south end of town to the Pike Place Market. Or, I'm sorry, not to the Pike Place Market, to the Pioneer Square. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of history, and that was the area that was running rampant in terms of prohibition, and earlier still with prostitution and, various businesses servicing and serving the people that were coming through en route to the gold rush. We have the name of Skid Row, and that was because they would take logs from the top of the hill, as we said, Seattle's built on hills, and they would skid them. That means push them down the hill down to the waterfront, where they would then either be loaded up and carted elsewhere or would be sent to a mill. Like every area, that the waterfront and the wharf often comes with some rather colorful history, and much of that is on display in the Pioneer Square area.
Well, the oddest thing about the Pioneer Square for me is the fact that when I walk into a building at ground level, I'm actually walking into the second floor of the building.
And that goes back to the Seattle fire when all of the buildings were burnt. And if you're there now, you will see that most of the buildings are brick. And that came about because of laws passed after the Great Fire that required everything to be built up and to be built of brick so that it wouldn't burn down. And if you're down there, you'll see almost everything is still brick. There hasn't been a lot of new construction that isn't.
At one point, they raised the street level basically by a floor because of drainage problems. And now with the underground tour, if they're still running that, you can tour that forgotten first floor.
It is. And I recommend doing the Underground Seattle tour. It was started by a man named Bill Spadell, and I would recommend his book to anyone who's particularly interested in the history with a good dose of reality and humor to read his book, Sons of the Prophets, and that's spelled Profits. And he talks about the founding families in Seattle, the Denny's, the Yeslers. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of the major ones, the sawmills that were put in, and how they used that particular area. He founded the Underground Tour when he was still alive, much of the commentary is a bit of a shtick, and it's a bit of a shtick that was taken from his book. But while some of it's
Mhm.
kind of humorous and is groan worthy, some of the puns, most of it is frighteningly true. So just know that you're going to get a bit of the puns and everything going underground. But the reality is that you were also going to see what were some original buildings and floors underneath the ground now that were ground level before. This also was an area where people were nabbed if they were going to be shanghaied and thrown on a ship and shipped out.
Interesting.
Our less than stellar history. And I only wish they taught us that version of history when we were in grade school.
Excellent. Anything else we want to do downtown? Otherwise, I think we should move on.
Yeah, between the north and the south end, you're going to find lots of restaurants and boutiques and bars and everything.
A couple that you would recommend?
I just did some over the weekend. So those are top of mind. There were too many for me to recommend. Let's just say that way. I don't want to single out something that's recently, because my goal in the recent trip was not to go to anywhere I had been before. So I'll give you this recommendation for fast food, which is not my first choice, but sometimes you just have to grab and run. Dick's Drive-In, which is a local chain started by someone named remarkably Dick, and who recently passed away. It's a local chain. They have a great sterling history here in the area, as hiring local college students and at a good wage and helping them get through college and move on. And best fast food burgers, I think, in town.
Okay. Any other sort of iconic Seattle restaurant that you think is worth a visit?
Well, this Space Needle always is.
For the view as much as the food.
And if you want, if I were to pick.
And you're talking about the revolving restaurant at the top,
Yes,
not the
at the top.
not the cafe at the bottom.
No, it's gotten varying reviews over the face of years. You're probably going for the view, not necessarily the menu. But if you're here for a special occasion and you really want to splurge, I would recommend Canlis. It's owned by the Canlis family. It is down on Lake Union. Not walkable. You're going to need to take a cab or Uber to get there. Probably the only restaurant in Seattle that still requires a dress code.
Oh, okay.
So you will need a jacket. I don't think they require a tie any longer. If they do, they have them there, and they frequently also have jackets in their closet. So sort of a throwback to days when people dressed up to go to dinner. It has a beautiful view of the lake, probably the restaurant in town that has the history of being one of the top restaurants in Seattle. People have gone back there. They have tables where every time a particular actor or performer or singer was in town, had their own special table. Very old Seattle, old money kind of restaurant. And the food is great.
Excellent. Any chance when I'm downtown that I'm going to be able to find a good cup of coffee?
Nah, we don't have coffee here. Well, we're home to Starbucks. And the original Starbucks was at the market. There are versions that it was not at the same place, but I don't want to split hairs. There's a Starbucks on every corner. Sometimes there's a Starbucks on each corner of the same block. We also have many independent roasters, which are worth a shot, and I guess pun intended, shot of espresso or something. Tully's is local. Seattle's Best, which is owned by Starbucks, is also here. As I said, we've got a variety of local roasters. You can't walk more than a block without finding a decent cup of coffee. One thing that Starbucks has opened, and I haven't had a chance to go out there yet, but I think that they're calling it the Starbucks experience, where you basically get to go out and learn more about coffee, because their shops have always been, come in, buy something, use your free Wi-Fi, get something to eat and leave. And this is actually, I guess they're doing examples of how roasting is done, maybe a barista for a moment kind of experience. And I have not had a chance to get out to that yet, but I've heard good things from people who have.
Well, and you say and leave. That wasn't the intention of the original founder of Starbucks. As I recall, it was supposed to be your third place. Your home, your work, and then your third place was the place you'd hang out with Starbucks.
Hang out, right.
They may have, with the free Wi-Fi, they may have gotten that more than they wanted, but...
The market location, there aren't tables, so you do have to leave. There are some tables, I think, outdoors, but it's not the place to hang out, where the other ones have simply become the place to hang out.
Excellent. Where side trips when we're in Seattle?
These are going to require either taking a tour or renting a car. So I think some of the other experiences are to head up to the Boeing Museum up in the Everett area,
Mm-hmm.
where you actually get to walk above and you can see, at the time it was a 747. I don't know if it still is on the line. So you actually get to see an airplane being built. There is a great interactive thing where you get to make your own paper airplane and design it and be as creative as you can and then see if it would actually fly. So that's a fun thing for kids. It's an industrial type of tour, which they're
Mm-hmm.
offered around the country, that kind of thing, but it's pretty unusual that you actually get to see an airplane being built. So I would definitely recommend that. I know there are tours that will pick you up at your hotel and take you up there, so that's an option. If you want to head off to do some wine tasting, most of that is located in Woodinville. Again, there are tours that will take you up there, or if you have a rental car, then you can do that. We don't grow wine in Woodinville. We don't grow grapes. We get the grapes from Eastern Washington. So you're
Mm-hmm.
not actually visiting vineyards. You're visiting the winery themselves. And some of them do production on site. Most of them don't. Or if they do some, it's only a small amount for just for tourism purposes where you can see wine being made. But they do have tasting rooms. So that's where you would go
Mm-hmm.
if you wanted to do your tasting. South of the city is our Museum of Flight. You probably don't want to rent a car just to go there. You would take a tour or arrange for a taxi, but it definitely is a ride away. I love the Museum of Flight. It takes everything from the beginning of airplane flying to a lunar rover to there's a Concorde on display there. One of the few places you can still see one. You can
Hmm.
see an internal exhibit of Air Force One, a decommissioned Air Force One.
Right.
So it covers
Mm-hmm.
everything from the beginning of flight to space exploration and has a lot of interactive exhibits as well. I can spend hours there. Depending on the time of year, it's at Boeing Field. So you're
Oh, okay.
right
Mm-hmm.
on an airport. That was our former major airport before we built SeaTac. There are also some private flights that you can take as tours or charters from there. You can go up in an old biplane. I think there are a variety of different antique restored aircraft that, if you want to have that experience, are fun. And you can also just sort of overlook the airport. So for aviation fans, that's a great spot. If you want to venture farther afield, then Tacoma is the next major city to the south.
Mm-hmm.
We have a history museum there that is actually Washington State History Museum that is located at the old train station. So historic location as well as interior. We have the Museum of Glass, which also has a glass blowing school. So if you time it right, you can see glass blowing there. You'll see a number of Chihuly's style art on display. They also have a great program where you can blow your own piece of glass. And usually people choose a dish or an ornament. So if you're going to be in the area for a while, head down there, blow a glass ornament or a glass dish, and go on about your other exploration in the area, then stop by and pick it up, or they will mail it to you. And that's a fun thing to do. If you want to cross over the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, there is a little community called Gig Harbor, which is right on the water. It's very small and has a lot of artsy types of boutique kind of things, like many of the cities around, little towns around the world that have that little kind of across the bridge and a little community kind of thing. They also have a distillery over there, and they're doing some real interesting things with distillation now in terms of vodka, bourbon, and whiskey, and some of the other liquors that I don't enjoy and aren't my favorites, but people are raving about. Seattle has crazy liquor laws, so this is actually something that's relatively new. We've only allowed distillation. Gosh, I don't think it goes that many years back. So it's relatively new, and people are doing some fun things. So that would be a little pocket community. If you want to go farther afield than that, I mean, these are all easy day trips from staying downtown. But if you want to make more of a weekend of it, then you could head down to Mount Rainier. There are tours that do it as a day trip from downtown. In my opinion, that's a pretty grueling day. You'd be much further ahead doing it, breaking it up and doing it as a weekend trip, going down to Mount Rainier, going down to Mount St. Helens and the park down there, or you can get over to the Olympic Peninsula. But really, those are separate weekend trips, I think, in and of themselves.
Excellent.
And if you want to venture to Eastern Washington, you can head over the pass. You can do see the North Cascade Highway, and that gets you into the eastern side of the state, which is a great add-on to your time in Seattle.
And bringing you back to Seattle, any particular festivals or days of the year that Seattle is the place to be?
Well, locals tend to avoid those time of years because they are so crowded, but we do have a couple of major events. Seafair is our major event that is the end of July into August, and that has different events in different communities around the Seattle area. So it's a span of days. It's never the same days, but it spans that time frame. Mm-hmm. One of the big features of that is the hydroplane races on Lake Washington, the unlimited hydros. Okay. So on a sunny day, getting down to the park is crazy. It's noisy. It's full of food and beverage. You'll get people out on the water in boats, tying up, creating sort of a raft of boats and watching the hydro races. A lot of locals just choose to stay home and watch it on television. The other couple of festivals is we have Northwest Folklife, and we also have the Hemp Fest. And both of those are big draws to the city from around the world. And for Northwest Folklife, we do attract music acts from around the world. So it's an international festival. And then we have Bumbershoot, which is, named for the umbrella. Mm-hmm. And that's another festival. And those are all at the Seattle Center.
Excellent. And we are running out of time here, both because of calendar pressure as well as the length of the episode. Before we get to our last 3 questions, anything else we should know before we go to Seattle?
Just come.
Cool.
It's a great place to visit. It's a great place to live.
You're standing in the prettiest spot in Seattle. Where are you standing? What are you looking at?
I'm standing on the deck of a Washington State ferry in the middle of Puget Sound looking at the skyline.
Excellent.
On a sunny day.
On a sunny day, okay. And I said the last 3 questions. I'm going to do it for one thing that makes you laugh and say only in Seattle.
We don't use umbrellas.
Really?
We don't use umbrellas. I can't tell you how many times if I'm traveling, people will say, well, don't you have an umbrella? You live in Seattle? And it's like, no, I don't. So if we're out doing something and it becomes torrential, we either flip up a hood, duck in somewhere for coffee or something to eat. And if it's drizzly, we just don't use umbrellas.
Interesting. I never noticed that.
Yeah. And I would say the other thing is not only do we not use umbrellas, but we stop at intersections despite the rain and no umbrella when it says not to cross and wait for the light to change.
Some other places do that, I'm told. Not that I have experienced that. Finish this thought. You really know you're in Seattle when what?
When you don't notice that it's raining. You just go about the day.
Okay. And if you had to summarize Seattle in just 3 words?
Green.
Oh, yeah.
Mountains, water.
And it does get enough rain that the green is something that you really notice when you're from someplace like where I live that doesn't. It is a very pretty area.
Flying in, you'll look down and see the green. When you're here, you can't help but look around and see trees and mountains and forests, and it's just green.
Well, and the other thing we didn't say, although you made reference to Lake Washington, for instance, is that when we talk about downtown being on the water, it's really between the water. There's really water everywhere in Seattle.
Everywhere. I mean, you've got Puget Sound, as we've referenced, and when we say the water, that's what we mean. You also have Lake Union, and you have Lake Washington. So that's sort of the 3 big water spots. And then, of course, we have many other smaller lakes in the city.
Well, excellent. Mary Jo, thanks for coming on the show. Where can people read more about your travels?
You can find me at travelingwithmj.com.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing with us your love for Seattle.
Thank you, Chris. It's always fun to talk about my hometown.
In news of the community, I heard from Martin this week, who said, my wife and I have been regular listeners for years. Congratulations on your 500th. We are looking forward to many more years. We are passionate about traveling. We usually get to go on vacation to foreign destinations about 2 to 3 times per year, and we make it a habit to re-listen to episodes relating to our travel before, during, and after each trip. Regarding the Maldives episode, I thought your listeners would like to know that there is a less expensive, albeit less luxurious option. My wife and I extended our 3-week trip to Sri Lanka by going on a 1-week cruise on a Donny boat, refurbished fishing boat, about 3 years ago. This allows one to visit more atolls, inhabited and uninhabited, and to experience some of the local islands and people away from the capital of Mali. The activities of the boat reminded us of a safari schedule with 2 daily snorkeling trips, each at different locations, something that spending a whole week at a single resort would not permit. The accommodations on the boat were basic, but much more affordable than $1,000 US per night for a hotel. The meals were surprisingly good and varied, given the fact that the cook had to carry pretty much all that was needed for a week, except for fresh fish caught along the way. With all meals included, I would estimate the price for a couple to be well under a quarter of that of the resorts. Martin, thanks so much for that. On the recent episode we did on Indianapolis, I heard from Jeff, who left a long comment, so I'll let you go to that episode to see all of it, but I want to pick out some parts of it. He says that Virginia Avenue is a corridor down which the cultural trail travels from downtown to nearby Fountain Square, and along it and nearby are some more interesting dining options, including the modern locavore Cerulean and Bluebeard restaurants, as well as the Turkish Bosphorus and some long-established Indian restaurants, 3 recently added breweries. The Vietnamese fusion Rook should be reopening any day now in its bigger location under some new condos and just over the road from us. And I should have mentioned that Jeff has lived in Indianapolis for 15 years, which is why he has the long comment here. He also mentions the Benjamin Harrison House on the Old North Side, an area with a large number of old houses converted to B&Bs, also host events. We will be visiting in April when different rooms each host a different short one-act play. That's interesting. And then he reminded me, and I had forgotten this, the USS Indianapolis delivered parts of the Hiroshima bomb to the airbase at Tinian and then was sunk by the Japanese submarines in 1942. This was noted for the far greater loss of life to sharks than to the original attack or sinking. And that's the part of the story that I remembered after being reminded by Jeff. So go check out Jeff's longer comment on the episode on Indianapolis. And Jeff, thanks so much. With that, we're going to end this episode of The Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com or do what Martin and Jeff did and leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. You can also follow me on Pinterest, Instagram, or Twitter as Chris2X, and I think I've got a MySpace someplace too if you're looking for that. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more